Well, hello and a very warm welcome to my channel. My name's Louise Savidge of Louise Savidge Muses, and a warm welcome if you're a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you are viewing my channel for the very first time. Sorry, I've got really soggy hair. I've just got out of the shower. I spent the day taking down a bay tree, sadly, that fell over in Storm Dara, or whatever it was called, recently, that hit the UK. And I've also been disposing of it as I go, so it's been quite an effortful day, and the weather was quite nice, so that was good. I had a little bit of warmth around me as I worked, but I thought I'd just come into my library and reflect on the prompt reading that Simon and I have been doing this year. Now, way back in December, you lovely lot, in fact I think maybe, yeah, it would have been December 2023, let me get my maths right, you lovely lot sent in lots of suggestions for prompts, and so Simon and I have been reading all year. I've actually finished my December prompt and I just have my bonus prompt left to read, and I'll tell you about that in a little while. I have really enjoyed doing this. I get very excited when we're picking all the prompts out of the jar and wondering what's going to come up. Some prompts have been easier to cope with than others, shall we say, and I always feel very spoilt because I've got a wonderful set of shelves over to my right, your left, that are full of books that I haven't yet read, so that's always my starting point. And one of the things I love about these prompts is that there's one per month, so it's manageable, and they sort of take me down reading avenues that I might not expect. Sometimes I get to books probably years before I might otherwise have done, and sometimes I pick up books that have been absolutely sat on my shelves for longer than Methuselah, I don't know. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience, and it's a bit like having a lucky dip, lucky dip once a month. The one thing that I really try to avoid doing, and I sense occasionally that sometimes some of you suffer from this, is I try to avoid ever seeing it as a chore, or ever getting stressed if I can't find a book that fits the bill. Simon and I don't want that at all. That is not the idea here. It's to, just as I say, approach reading in a slightly different way. And also perhaps sort of think about choosing books in libraries or in charity shops in a similar way as well, because occasionally there will be nothing on those shelves that fits the prompt, and it's been fun to rummage in charity shops and things like that and see what turns up, and sort of turn my attention towards books that I might not otherwise have had on my radar. So I also, before I go any further, I want to thank Miss Vix Reads for putting the prompts on Storygraph. That has been a lifesaver for me. I never remember what they were if it wasn't for her putting them on there. And the other thing I really enjoy as well is usually a month or two ahead of the next month, the upcoming months, I'm not getting my words out very well, I will have a look at what you lovely people have been reading too. So I really like that. I like sort of, oh yeah, oh that fits the prompt, oh I wouldn't have thought of that one. I like that sense of reading as a community together, you know, ticking off each month. It's a bit like an annual advent calendar, isn't it, with 12 windows instead of 24. I don't know, anyway, there we are. So I was going to try and make this a reasonably swift video. Oh, I've got a feeling that's not going to happen. I don't know, I'm going to try. So what I wanted to do was just to give you and actually I have to be quite honest, I'm doing this partly for myself, because it's really good to kind of remind myself of the wonderful books that I've come across this year, and also what the prompts were. I've cheated. I've put a sticky post-it note on the back of each book to remind me what the prompt was for the month, so that I don't get it wrong, because I just cannot hold them in my head. So anyway, I do know that the very first prompt this year was to read a book with a snake on the cover, and I felt absolutely thrilled because I received this book, Mary Beard's Emperor of Rome, which has an eagle with a snake inside it, not inside it, wrapped around it, that it has seized on the cover. And Simon bought me this as a Christmas present, not knowing, I don't think we did know, certainly I didn't know at that point, that this was one of the prompts. So I think I'm trying to remember whether we did them before or after Christmas Day. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And the interesting thing about this is that I don't think I would have read this until a lot later in the year, but because it was the prompt, I read it then. And it was brilliant because later on in the year, Simon and I actually got to interview Mary Beard about this book. So all I had to do was sort of skim through it and remind myself. I felt way ahead of the game when that happened. And this is a superb history of the concept of emperors. Well, obviously in Roman emperors. You know, what was it like to actually be an emperor? Where did you live? What was the job like? How did you prepare for it? And all those sorts of questions. And I absolutely loved it. It was a really good way to start my reading year. In fact, I think it was, I could be wrong, I'd have to go back and look at my story graph, but I think it was the first book I read this year, possibly the second. I might have started off with fiction, I can't remember, but I know I really, really enjoyed it. And although it's a tome and it's very heavy, it's so readable. I really admire people who can write history that delivers a very strong narrative. Personally, I love facts and information. I'm not very good at remembering facts and details, as you've probably realised if you've been watching this for any length of time, the channel. But so I kind of need a narrative thread to keep me focused on the historical detail, and I feel she does that absolutely brilliantly. What an amazing woman. So there we are. That was January's prompt, and as I say, it prompted me in the sense that I wouldn't have got to that book as quickly, I don't think. And then February's was the retelling of a myth, fairy tale or legend, and I chose this book, Colm Toibin's House of Names. Now again, this is a book that I had on my shelves probably for, I would say, 4 years at least. I don't know, that might be wrong. I don't know when he wrote it. And I'd been avoiding reading it because I was a little bit, what's the word? Overfull. I'd had a surfeit of classical myth retellings. So I'd put off reading it for that reason. And boy, did I love it. I mean, I was so glad. It could have sat there. I reckon it could have sat on my shelves for another 4 years. I had no idea. It's the first time I've read Colm Toibin, and I will be going back to him. That's one of the things I'd like to do this year coming. I hadn't read any of his books before. What a writer. I just adored the use of language, the ruggedness of this book, the way he captures the primitive concepts. It focuses on the story of Clytemnestra and oh my goodness, my brain, Orestes. Thank you. Oh, I think you can tell I've been out of the classroom for a year. These things are not at my fingertips like they should be. Yeah, Orestes and so on. So it's a family saga, if you like. Agamemnon, the father, the king, is away at war, and he has murdered basically his own daughter. He's deceived his family, and the book focuses on the way that they are coping at home while father is away, and the possible consequences of the father's actions. So it's just, I really, really loved it, and I'm glad that thanks to the prompts I came to it sooner than I might have done. And I love the cover. I don't know what it is about that cover. There's a sense of isolation, I think, and yeah, loneliness, which I think is there in the novel. And then March's prompt was to read a book that had been longlisted or shortlisted for a prize that you've never read from before. Now, to my utter shame, I can't remember In fact, I can remember. I know that this book had been longlisted and shortlisted for a number of prizes, and it's Five Little Indians by Michelle Good, and it tells the story of the awful abuse of young children in Canada, Native American children who were abused at the hands of well, society, but in particular the Catholic priests and nuns who were supposed to be looking after them. And I felt this book really, well, I'm finding it difficult to talk about because there are still scenes in it that are trapped in my head. The damage that it follows the story of a male and female who were in one of these places, and you know, it was actually on an island. These children couldn't run away, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to, although in fact one of them manages to. And the trauma, and what she does so well is she looks at the repercussions throughout their lives of what happens to them, but also at the idea that even when you're in a really inhumane situation, it doesn't dent your own, or it doesn't have to necessarily dent your own humanity. And yeah, I there's a lot to admire in this book. And then again, oh my goodness, Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, which I think won the Booker Prize a couple of years ago. And this in fact maybe last year actually. Oh, I don't know, I don't get my chronology right. But the prompt was to read one of another Booktuber's or Bookstagrammer's favourite book of 2023. So I went on to the lovely Jane Campbell's Booktube, let me get it right, and she had chosen this book, Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. I think I haven't yet decided on my top 10 fiction books of the year or novels, but I have a feeling that this one will be very hard to beat. I know I've wanged on about it an awful lot. And again, you know, I don't know what it is with me. I think I've had a very up and down relationship with the Booker Prize in the past, in terms of not always enjoying the books that I've read that have been shortlisted or have won it. So again, it's a book that I might not have come to if it hadn't have been for the prompt. I did have it on my shelves. Whether I would ever have read it, I don't know. It's a dystopian story. It's incredibly dark, but it is so well told. It's really sinister, and it manages to make you realise that tipping into a dystopia could happen at any moment in any of our lives. I know some people aren't comfortable with the word dystopia being used in relation to this. It's a totalitarian society basically that it depicts, but it's that sense of complete lack of agency, and what is brilliant about it is that it focuses on a mother who has 3 children, one of whom is very small and one of whom is sort of in, you know, almost to adulthood, and her husband is taken away by the police, and his absence sort of hangs right through the novel, and it looks really closely at the impacts of his absence on the whole family, but also what's happening to society as a result of this totalitarian regime. And it focuses on ordinary moments, you know, trying to make the tea, I don't know, trying to get your kids to school, all those sorts of things within this horrific circumstance. So again, really thanks to Jane Campbell for choosing that one, and also, you know, thanks to the prompt for bringing me to the book quicker than I might have done. And then May was really easy, because it was to read a book by an author with the same first name as you, and I love Louise Doughty's writing, so I picked a Louise Doughty book that I'd found in a charity shop, and it's called Whatever You Love, and it's the story of a couple who are estranged, but what they do have in common is that their child was murdered, I think. Murdered or disappeared? Pretty sure murdered. Yeah. Well, killed in an accident. And it's about the way that, you know, years later they're trying to, you know, the impact of this on them and the way it affects them. And again, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. I'm not sure how easy this prompt might be for some people, because some names are obscure, aren't they? So this I've got a sort of feeling in my water. Oh, that's a funny expression, isn't it? My mum used to use it. I've got a feeling in my water. That that this might have been a tricky prompt for some people. I know that for me personally, when I was at school, there were 3 Louises in my class. It was a very, very popular name 59 years ago. So I you know, it was always going to be unlikely that I would have a problem finding a book that was written. I wasn't going to have a problem finding a book that was written by somebody called Louise. I suspect Simon, it's not too difficult, but there will be some names, like my daughter Miriam, for example. That's a slightly less usual name, certainly in the UK. You know, she might find it more tricky. My son Seth might find it more tricky. So yeah, I think it depends on your name, and also obviously surnames can be obscure. So I think that's probably a prompt that the trouble is, it's really difficult choosing prompts, because when they emerge, you think, oh yeah, that's a really good idea, and it's really hard actually until you try to sit down and get the book to know whether it works or not. So yeah, I think this was one people might have struggled with. I hope not, but I think they might have done. And also to say, you know, feedback on prompts that haven't worked as well as prompts that have would be really, really useful for us, because at the end of this video, but I'm going to do it now, I'm going to appeal to you to get typing and suggest prompts for us to pull out of the jar over Christmas, when we are, excuse me, when we will be making our prompt video. So June's prompt or challenge was animal, vegetable or mineral. So you had to find a book with that element on the cover. And I suspect maybe that would include the title, I don't know. And again, you know, bend the rules. Don't be frightened. This is meant to be fun. So if it's not clear whether it's the picture or the title, it could be either. It doesn't really matter. And now clearly this, I don't know if you can see from here, but this book has cows on the title. And this is called The Twin by Gerbrand Bakker. And I bought this in London a couple of years ago when we were down in London for the Women's Prize. And we went to the wonderful Gaze the Word bookshop in Soho. And this is what I came away with. And oh my goodness, again, I think this novel will probably make, I'd be amazed if it doesn't, the top 10, although I can only choose 10. I'm panicking about it already. This will probably make one of my favourite novels of the year. I thought this was absolutely sensational. It wasn't sensational, that's not the right word, but it had that effect on me. I thoroughly loved the protagonist, who is a dairy farmer in Holland. Bakker is Dutch, and it's about he's got a dying father upstairs in his home, and the relationship between him and his father has been really tortured, and it's all about how he copes with his father's demise, slow demise, but it's also about so many other things. It's about identity, it's about finding love. It's an incredibly poignant and touching story, and yeah, I only picked it up in June because June or July? June, because it had cows on the cover. I mean, you know, Who could believe it? July was, again, well, it wasn't easy because I could have chosen a lot to fit this bill. This is a good prompt though. It's to choose a backlist book by a favourite author. And we all do that, don't we? We all, well, I don't know whether we all do, but I certainly do. I'm not very good at keeping up with all my favourite authors. I don't necessarily read their books as they come out. And this is Bitter by Akwaeke Emezi. I love Akwaeke's writing. I think they write particularly well for me about art. This is a novel for that is aimed at teenagers, but my goodness, what a wonderful, wonderful book. And it's about a young art student. They're living in this kind of, I don't know how I would describe it. They're living in a college, which is a kind of safe haven for LGBTQ young people. And actually, you know, being allowed to express themselves through their art. And again, it's a dystopian society. There's a lot of oppression, and Bitter is struggling with sort of mental health issues. It's one of the reasons why she's there, and doesn't have the strength to join some of her friends in protesting against the oppressive regime. And the novel looks at how she taps into that strength. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And as with Pet, Akwaeke's other novel for young people, art comes to life. And the way that they describe art coming to life is just amazing. August prompt, well, it was lovely to pick up a poem. So this is Simon Armitage's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, because this prompt was to read a book with an honorific in the title, so Dr, Miss, Sir in this instance. Again, I thought that was a very clever prompt, but I don't know how easy it was for people to find books with honorifics. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what you have to say about that. But I was just in the mood for some really meaty, rhythmic, really sort of assonant poetry. The soundscape in this poem is what stays with me, and the sort of feeling of reading a really old, raw legend about Sir Gawain and yeah, his relationship with the Green Knight and the challenge, the gauntlet that's thrown down to him by the knight, and the characters that Gawain meets, full of, you know, I am not somebody who approves of hunting, but the speed and the energy of the hunt is really captured very well, I think, by Armitage in this. Yeah, a really enjoyable read. And September, you see, this is the thing. I thought that I did not have any books on my shelf with a volcano on the cover. So also, the other thing that the prompts do is they force me to look at book covers properly. I mean, I'm always aware of a cover. I always feel like the cover can quite often be a sort of a factor in choosing the books that I do. But I was desperate. I'm not going to buy a book for this prompt, was my thinking, and I just couldn't find one. Anyway, I just happened to notice that there is one here in this window on the Wolf Den. So this is the third of Elodie Harper's trilogy set in ancient Pompeii, before the eruption of Vesuvius, and following the fortunes of a young prostitute. I really enjoyed the first one. It was a wonderful historical romp. The second one lingered a bit too long for me, but this one I thought was back up to form, and I really, really enjoyed catching up with Amara and all her acquaintances, particularly the character of Pliny the Elder. So this was a really good September read. Yeah, I think I read it very, very quickly. And then October, and it's sort of suddenly, you know, we're towards the end of the year. It's really weird. So I feel like I only read this yesterday. Actually, it was a good few weeks ago now. But the October prompt was to choose a book set in a city, town or region that you've lived in for more than a year. And again, that might, I suspect, you know, not everybody has moved around. I haven't moved around that much. I'm trying to think. I've lived in 4 counties in this country. So yeah, I don't think I've moved around an awful lot. I've only lived in 4 or 5 different places. So you know, that immediately is limiting. So I don't know how people would have found this prompt, but I was really lucky in that I found on my shelves Saltwater by Jessica Andrews, which I think Simon had given me ages before, raving about it. And this was, I'm pretty sure this was her debut. And she is an author who comes from quite an impoverished background, and she's writing about the Northeast, which is where I spent a wonderful 4 years as a student, and then as a trainee teacher when I was much younger with Simon. Simon obviously was still living with me at the time. And I've got fantastic memories of that part of the world. And this is an unflinching look at the impact of growing up in a very sort of built up place, and then sort of managing to educate yourself and to get yourself to university. In this case it's in London, and the impact on that, you know, the impact on this character's sort of psychology is really, really fascinating. There's also reflections in this book on death, on you know, when you lose somebody very close to you and how that can throw you into a sort of spiral. And I love the fragmentary nature of it as well. Yeah, I thought it was a very powerful novel. And again, it had been sat around a little while, but it got a good dusting off, and I really enjoyed reading it. I don't think there's been a single prompt book that I've read that I haven't really enjoyed. And that's weird, because sometimes, you know, you're reading it perhaps at a moment when you wouldn't normally choose that book. Because I think I read where I can, I read by mood and whim. I'm not somebody who plans my reading particularly, although obviously, you know, soon, in a couple of months, I'm going to be, hopefully they'll send them to me again, reading and vlogging about the Women's Prize non-fiction long list. So obviously when I'm reading 16 books in 6 weeks, I have to plan, but generally speaking, I'm very much a mood reader, and so it sort of, you know, potentially goes against the grain, but I've really enjoyed it, and maybe I should plan my reading more. Maybe that's, you know, that's what I'm learning. So November was to read, and again, great prompt, because everybody can do this, was to read a novel read a book by an author you've never read before. And I had on my shelf Cygnet by Susan Butler, American writer, and I had no idea what this novel was about. I've only relatively recently finished it, and again, I really, in fact, I'm still trying to work out what I thought of it. But what's unusual about this book is that it's set on an island off the east coast of America, and it's about a retirement community that a young woman comes to live in, and the sort of impact on the community of her being there, but more importantly, the impact on her of being in that retirement community. So I need to let it settle a bit, and I'll be talking about this book in more detail when I do my wrap up for the month. Goodness knows when that's going to happen, because yeah, well, anyway, we'll worry about that some other time. But yeah, I think on balance, I thought this was a very interesting novel, and it was subject matter that isn't often tackled. by authors. And then December, again, I suspect this might have been tricky for people. This was a prompt where you needed to think about a novel that had, not a novel, I keep saying that, a book, it doesn't have to be a novel, that has a connection to your personal or family history. And this book is called Miss Savidge Moves Her House. Now, I have no evidence that I am directly connected to this particular Miss Savidge whatsoever, except that there aren't that many people on the planet with this surname with the same spelling. We are a very small and select group, so I'm pretty confident that somewhere along the line we will be related, but I haven't managed to unpick it. I went to stay with my brother last weekend, and he's got the family tree that my dad researched, and I meant to ask him if we could have a peek at it, but I forgot. And again, this is where, you know, I was in a charity shop with Simon, and he saw this and he said, "Oh, Mum, that would be brilliant for that particular prompt." And again, I would not have bought this book. In fact, he might have even paid for it. I can't remember. I think there's a bit of a debacle. Anyway, but you know, this book would not be in my hands if it hadn't been for the prompts, and I absolutely loved it. I've chosen it for my book of the month this month. That video should land next week. In fact, I think the way I'm going, it will probably land on Christmas Day. But it's the story of a woman who literally moves her house. And actually, it's not a story, it's a true story. It's non-fiction. It's written by her nephew's wife, who inherited the house after her death. And it's just a wonderful story of determination, resilience, persistence, shrewd behaviour. I just absolutely loved it, really loved it, and I wouldn't have read it. So they are all the prompts that I have read. That's the 12, one for each month. And then there was a bonus prompt, which was to read a book with the word 2 or 4 in the title. And I am a massive Thomas Hardy fan. I read most of his books, but not all, when I was younger. I'm glad I didn't read them all, because I'm not a massive rereader. I think that might be having been scarred from years of teaching and rereading set texts. So I don't reread very often, partly because also there are so many books out there. Too many books, not enough time. But I have not read 2 on a Tower by Hardy, so I did deliberately go out and treat myself to this book so that it would fit the prompt, and because I really, really wanted to read it. And that's the other thing that you can do with these prompts. You can use it as if you needed one, but you can use it as an excuse to go and order something you really want from the library, or go and treat yourself to a book that you have long wanted to read. So on that note, I would like to say to you all, please get your thinking caps on. Come up with some wonderful prompts for 2025. I am off up to Simon's for Christmas. We'll be together on Christmas Day, which will be absolutely lovely. And we will, at some point over the Christmas period, I suspect it might be Boxing Day morning, I've got a feeling, we will dive into the prompt jar and start selecting the prompts. So if you have prompts to suggest, please put them in the comments below. I know that Simon's going to make a similar video. I suspect it's going out the same evening, which will be Wednesday night, talking about his prompts. I'm really looking forward to watching that, because I want to see, I know some of the books that he read for the prompts earlier on in the year, but I don't really know how his prompt reading's been going. And that's the other thing. One of the things that Simon and I were talking about on the phone the other day was the fact that we feel, not guilty, that's not the right word, but I certainly feel I don't showcase the prompt reading enough on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And so if any of you got any suggestions for prompt content for 2025, a way that we could raise the profile and share prompt reading a bit more, please do let us know, because we will hopefully try to put whatever you suggest into action.
So happy reading, everybody. Happy prompt reading. Please let me know your prompt reading stories, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing our prompt selection video with you very early. I think hopefully it's going to go out, I think, the 1st of January. So very, very early in the new year. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely Christmas, or whatever festival you're celebrating at this time of year. Enjoy. Bye.